Venkat, thanks very much for agreeing to get grilled in this interview.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So, congratulations on finally becoming director of the Science Institute. I know you've already been associated with the Institute for several years, starting in 2022.
Yeah, Jan 22.
Jan 22, you became a senior scientist.
Yeah.
And you've been interim director for the last year, and finally you've been confirmed as the long-term director. So, and then rewinding a little bit, so I know you've, unlike many people in our field, I guess, and you've had the opportunity to work in a number of flagship departments over the years. I mean, starting out at MIT, and then you were here, I believe, as a postdoc. Then you went to University of Washington, CMU, and finally you're back here. So how has this journey through all these various institutions informed your perspective on?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure to be associated with all these, as you said, really fine institutions. All of these places have fantastic theory groups and broader CS departments, so having a great network of great theorists and computer scientists in the country certainly helps, and especially here, we consider ourselves as the global hub for theoretical computer science, and increasingly theory is interacting with computer science, very deeply and also beyond that. So I think these experiences hopefully position me well to take a very global view and also a broad view of theory, because different departments have a different specialty in terms of what they really shine at. Just in terms of maybe the number of faculty they have in a particular area, or even sometimes how they view theory. For example, I know at Berkeley, viewing theory as a lens on computational phenomena more broadly was a real strong point. And so I think you also pick up a little bit of all the different ways theory can have impact, and I think that's been a great journey.
So now, in fact, I recall when I was associate director here, I think it was 2015, you ran a program with David Shea, which was an example of the computational lens in a sense. Yeah. I mean, I think it was officially an information theory program.
Yeah.
It had the moniker Shannon meets Turing, I believe.
Yeah.
So have things changed in the Institute since then, or do you feel that it's been sort of maintained its path pretty much?
Yeah, I think those were somewhat early days for the Institute, right? This was spring 2015, so it's probably the third year of the Institute running. And and that was, I think the Institute in some sense has remained the same, in the sense, for example, one of the hallmarks of that program was, even though people in EE and computer science were investigating many of these questions on parallel, and we would meet at workshops and conferences, but never had this opportunity of a sustained interaction where you stay in the same building for long term, meet for tea, and just that osmosis which happens over a long period of time. That led to some really nice results, as you might remember from our. It was a very productive and very fun program, and much of that remains the same. The topics keep, we have an ever-changing cast of characters and topics, so it's always interesting here, never a dull moment. But I think the spirit remains the same, that it really accelerates research in established areas. It cultivates new kind of connections in other areas, and sometimes just broadens the footprint of theory. All this continues to go. Maybe one change is that we now have these longer term activities in the form of pods, particularly in quantum and machine learning, and more recently resilience. So that sort of didn't exist then. We often do summer activities, which didn't used to be the case back then. So in some sense, we are more of an all year round place, and we also do some activities beyond just thematic semesters. So it's just a little bit broader, but the core remains the same. I think the bread and butter is still these thematic semester programs.
So obviously you're very well known, perhaps best known for your seminal work on coding theory and error-correcting codes, which sort of goes back to your PhD, but also you've expanded on it a lot since then. But I think one of the reasons that you're particularly well suited to heading up a broad institute like this is you do have very broad interest throughout theoretical computer science. So algorithms, complexity theory, information theory, and
Yeah.
optimization, and so on. Based on that broad perspective, I mean, what do you see as the future of theoretical computer science in the next 5 to 10 years? Where should we be going? What should we be focusing on?
I guess, I do have sort of broad interests within theory, but perhaps a lot of it sits in this. I mean, I view theory as sort of having 3 sort of interrelated pillars. One is the core theory and its connections to math, algorithms, complexity, crypto, and so on. And the second aspect is, and all of these are very relevant to no single person can work on all these aspects. I think they all come together beautifully at the Simons Institute. The second aspect is synergy, with practice, and that's becoming increasing. It was always important, but now with AI, there's just a whole host of challenges which we have to address. And the third is just this theory plus X kind of thing. How can theory inform other disciplines, and how can it really bring these algorithmic perspectives into all these fields, which is becoming clearly increasingly important. So I kind of view all of these things as very important. I myself probably mostly sit in the first bucket of working on, while I work in many different areas of theory, they mostly sit in the first bucket, but I do have a lot of respect and appreciation for the second and third buckets. And also I'm interested in a little bit on how AI is going to influence theory and vice versa. So there's a little bit of bleeding into the other aspects as well. So.
Do you see the Institute as part of its role as to sort of protect, if you like, the first bucket, the theory, the math bucket, or do you see it as a more of a symmetric effort in all 3 directions?
Yeah, I guess protect sounds like a sort of too protective a word,
okay,
and I do think the first bucket, with all its brilliant connections and beautiful results, and a lot of us were drawn into theory for that bucket, right? So I actually don't really fear that that's going to go away. It's only good that people have these other aspects as well, and it really does help the public image of theory and the image of theory within computer science departments and broader things inside campus. So I think these other aspects actually kind of help the core theory as well, right? And so I don't really view it as a competition. But perhaps one thing to be conscious of is, with the institute programming, it's always natural to do the hottest topic, because there's just so much activity, you want to convene people. It's good to have a bit of balance and have some programming which says, okay, yeah, maybe this area is always going to be there, and progress is not going to be at the same pace as some of these newer areas, but we still need to have programs. As long as I think we are conscious and have a balance in programming, I think the field will hopefully take care of itself. So.
And maybe on a slightly more personal level, I mean, do you still manage to carve out time for research? I mean, you do still seem to be very active in research. I mean, it's surprising to me how you're able to do that while also running this place. Do you have a strategy for that, or you just?
Maybe I should sleep more. No, I think I don't have an explicit strategy. I think I always place research as something which defines me. I feel like I couldn't do this job well if I'm not active in research.
But you still have students?
Yeah, I still have students, and I think one of the things is, that's the part of the job I probably still relish the most. I think the talent which comes into this field is mind-boggling, and thank God I'm not applying to grad schools these days, right? I mean, and it's incredible. So I think you really. Obviously, I benefit from working with amazing students. I have in the past at other institutions and continue to do so at Berkeley with amazing students and postdocs and colleagues. And that really helps, because you can bring to the table one aspect, and increasingly these connections between different areas, even inside core theory, are really what is pushing a lot of amazing advances. And I think it's a pleasure to work with people and be continuing to do that. And I hope to, continue to do that, and I might have to, the balance might shift a bit, but I hope that will still be a core part of who I am.
And then, even more surprisingly, I noticed you're actually teaching a class on lean, right? As a proof support for mathematical proofs. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Now I guess I'm on record saying that I guess now I cannot back out.
Yeah, no, you got to teach
doing
it
it.
now. Yeah.
No, I sort of signed up to teach before I decided, before this thing was decided, and I just thought I'll continue doing it. And the choice of topic was definitely is a bit of stretch for me. A couple of years ago, I heard about this project called this liquid tensor project, which formalized some amazing theorem of Peter Schulze in condensed mathematics. And I saw this and I said, well, wow, people are formalizing things at the research frontier at this level. Theory should also be doing this. And I just thought this would be a good way for me to force myself to really learn this thing. I have been running an undergraduate project for about 3 semesters now, where a small team of undergrads have been coding up some proofs from our coding theory text.
Oh, really? I see. Mm-hmm.
And but it's mostly led by my PhD student. And my vision for the course is not so much that I would teach people, but I will just get people sufficiently comfortable that they would take on some nice size theorem as a project and try to formalize it. And hopefully we'll get the ball rolling. And I know that there are some other courses people are trying other places as well. So we'll see how it goes. It's a big experiment. It's a stretch for me. And I think the timing is a particularly bit off because I will be stepping into this role.
Right.
I wish the timing was better, but sometimes you just have to do it.
And how do you see connections between that type of support for theorem proving and interactive proof via LLMs?
Yeah, it's sort of related, but not directly. I think the course itself will probably not be really, maybe there'll be a lecture or two on this pipeline. But the way it can sort of come in is that if, right now, writing these proofs in Lean takes a lot of effort, even for simple things. Of course, it gets easier as you're more familiar, as you build more libraries, but still it's very time consuming. So it's a prime target for like auto formalization and stuff. And if you're able to do that, and then you can have a good corpus of training data for these LLMs. And you can imagine a loop where, a lot of this process is automated. And it could be a great test bed for these LLMs because once you produce a proof in Lean, there is no hallucination. If it checks out, it's a correct proof. So in that sense, it really takes away one big problem with current interactions with LLMs, which is that you always have to check what it is saying. Right? So, and that's also one of my goals is that even if this improves, and I hope it does, right, it's still familiarity with this language will help to know what you're getting and is it correct or not. Much like right now, if you interact with an LLM for proofs, you can't trust it. Right. You have to check the proof or check the code yourself.
So it's a complementary
thing.
Yeah. So. Okay. So I shift gear a little bit. So we talked a bit about sort of programming and the science at the Institute. Another big question, of course, for people who are closely involved with the Institute is long-term sustainability and fundraising. So there's the very generous support from the Simons Foundation, including through matching funds.
Yes, yeah.
But also I think everyone's aware, and you more so than anyone, presumably, that it's important to bring in additional funds to sort of realize the full potential of the Institute.
Yeah.
So are you optimistic about that? And what kind of sources do you plan to tap as we move forward?
Yeah, I guess I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, but it's a challenging part and probably the part of this job which keeps me up most at night recently. One thing I'll begin by saying is that if you and you know this very well as well, having curated many of these programs. If you have a program on topic X, right, like say fine-grained complexity, and the sort of the delta which a program here makes to that field is enormous, and I think our community widely acknowledges that and stuff like that. So it really does fit the mandate of federal agencies like NSF to sort of fund something like this, because ultimately the goal is to advance science. Now, unfortunately, there isn't directly a mechanism to do this, because what we are doing is not PI sponsor. It's not done by a single PI or a team of PIs. We are facilitating research by a lot of people. And in doing so, actually, we are getting enormous leverage, right? Because we get all these amazing top people in the field come here, spend a semester or a few months, and they are actually partially supported by their home institution. So you get this incredible leverage for the spending we do at the Simons Institute. So I'm hoping there would be I know the current times are like a little bit uncertain, but hopefully in the long run there is a way to lobby NSF to also recognize this, which they have clearly recognized in the math world. So the DMS has funds all these math institutes to, of course there have been funding cuts there, I believe, and so on, but still the core, they fund a large portion of these activities because they realize that it advances the science enormously. Now that alone that's one angle, but that's going to take some work to get going. But we have a fairly robust set of industry partners, and I think it's one of my top priorities to enhance those connections. We just had a very lively and really informative industry day, packed with a lot of talks and a lot of people from industry. So this I am also optimistic about. And this vein, we recently have an AI for Math initiative with 5 institutions, one of which is Simons Institute, generously supported by Google.org and Google DeepMind. So I'm hoping these connections with AI and how AI might change the practice of theory and so on is also an opportunity. And of course, one definitely has to do some things with like foundations and philanthropists and so on. And there, I think I'm also thinking about different ways. Theory has had impact on our lives and society and technology and so many things in so many ways. And different facets of this impact resonate with different people. And sometimes the impact is direct. Somebody discovers a better algorithm and a whole, it makes great improvement. Or like, you have the quantum factoring algorithm and 30 years later we have a $100 billion industry. So sometimes these are very single events. But I think there is a deeper impact theory has in terms of its conceptual impact and how it allows you to frame questions and really ask things. And sometimes formalization of, say, privacy as differential privacy is a good example. So I think there are so many different aspects, and I think having good stories which resonate with people is good. I think this is probably a good thing to do regardless of these fundraising initiatives, because I think it's good for people even to know about what theoretical computer science is and what impact it can have, which I think even the lay people probably have much less clue about theoretical computer science than theoretical physics or biology or math. And some of it is that we are just much newer and we are still continuing to find lots of interesting connections, but some of it is that we need to put more effort. And I feel like the Simons Institute...
to be more like physicists in that respect.
Yeah. And I think the Simons Institute is if Simons Institute doesn't do it, who's going to do it, right? I kind of view us as also the home for theory, the global hub, and we have to kind of watch out for theory and help it flourish.
And do you think the Institute is somewhat immune to, there are challenges nationally and globally on, changing attitudes to science, and also the federal funding landscape is changing quite a bit. So, do you think the Institute is well placed to cope with those challenges?
Yeah, I think the immediate local challenges, I think we are well placed because, as you know, most of our operating budget comes from the Simons Foundation and Simons Foundation International. So I think there's, we can continue what we are doing in a similar way. But perhaps a deeper thing is, ultimately I mentioned this before, our field is what it is in part, large part because of the incredible talent which comes in, right? The students, postdocs, young researchers and so on. I think if, indirectly there is a threat to this pipeline. And that's not just in theory, but in many fields of science and engineering and so on. And sometimes when you break these pipelines, it takes
especially international pipeline.
Yeah, international pipeline, or even domestically, people might say, oh, the funding landscape is very uncertain. Let me just take a job. So you might lose a whole generation of like these students who would have entered PhD, and you will feel the downstream effects in the pipeline. So and this will affect us, right? So I think that is probably a more long-term impact, which I'm worried about, but we'll have to see.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And so I guess the people watching this, they're presumably mostly your constituency as potential visitors and supporters of the Institute. Do you have a message for our community as to what they can do to help secure the long-term future of the institute, not just from a fundraising
Yes,
perspective,
yes,
also
yeah.
from a scientific perspective.
Yeah, from a scientific perspective, I mean, yeah, I want to really reiterate and emphasize that we are primarily a community-driven institute, right? We want to house the best programs in theory, and we don't want to decide top-down what they are. Right. We want the community to tell us what they are. And so one very concrete thing people can do is to send us proposals, and we even have a pre-proposal, more lightweight option now if people just want to scope out things. So I would say definitely send us ideas for program proposals, and perhaps also hearing on what other modes we can have an impact on theory and the community would be good to hear. For example, I mentioned this risk to the pipeline of PhD students and young researchers. Perhaps we should do things like summer schools, which some of these math institutes do. And we might have some, we're not doing programming every summer, and so we might have, availability in the schedule and so on. So is this something we should do? I mean, and we would love to hear people ideas from the community and what would be good topics. Or maybe somebody would even volunteer, hey, if you organize this, I will come and teach this course for 2 weeks, right? Because I think this can be really good because, if, senior undergrads or young grad students get to see such things, it can have an enormous impact. They'll say that, oh, this field is really thriving. This is such beautiful ideas. And I think the beauty aspect is very important. I mean, I was drawn to theory for its beauty, and I'm sure it was the case for you and so many of us, right? And we could imagine other ways to showcase these. And indeed, our regular programs are a little bit more for postdoc faculty level people as opposed to students. So should we be doing more things at the student level? What could we be doing? And I think it'll be great to hear from the community.
That would be a big expansion of the mission, but also very...
it can be an expansion, or it can be sort of rebalancing of the mission too, right? Rather than doing yet another summer program, we could do this. Or we could do this 1 year and do the program, but yeah.
But you feel that generally the Institute's healthy in the sense of continuing to attract new people into the Institute rather than repeat visitors, and that can be a challenge, I think, for these program-based
things. Yeah, but we have done surprisingly well. On the one hand, one statistic I learned recently, and even though I think it's you can just do the math and it's not surprising, it's like the Institute in its first decade or a little more has hosted over 4,000 people to campus as long-term visitors. These are people coming for a month or more. I think we are doing well in this regard. And of course, we could always do more. And I think this is also where the community could help us. Somebody in theory could team up with somebody in some other area and send us a proposal, and we could get a whole new set of people who we would not otherwise think of. But we are very happy to get new people into the Institute and come, participate in our programs.
Great. So you've already told us what keeps you up at night. What makes you optimistic at breakfast in the morning?
Yeah, it's actually a bit reverse. Actually, I usually don't have trouble going to sleep, but often I wake up early in the morning and then I start really agonizing and worrying, and then hard to go back to sleep. But regardless, maybe in my optimistic times, what keeps me optimistic is again the fact that I'm in this really incredible community with great colleagues of all seniority, great students and young people coming into the field. Beautiful ideas, and I wish I could go to more of the talks here. Having a leadership administrative role, if I go to talks which happen in this building, that's all I'll be doing all my life. But it's just invigorating to see that you're part of this community, and with the steady progress on long-standing problems, people are just really courageous, and they feel like they can make connections to other fields. So I think it's mostly, I would say, the theory community and its vibrancy and intellectual depth.
So
actually, I wanted to ask you something, if it's okay. Yeah, I know. I mean, I would. Yeah, as everyone knows, you were the founding associate director for the institute in the most important initial days, and for the first 6 years or so, I believe. And and I would be remiss to not mention that we are enjoying the institute today in all its glory, in large part to your really hands-on and visionary leadership in setting the institute up, really every aspect of it, and really making it this flourishing home for worldwide theory. So I wonder if, hopefully we are still continuing in the path you set us on, but is there any advice or other things you would want to share or perspective?
I've been very impressed with the degree to which the Institute's expanded since I left. I guess it was about 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah. So the mission has expanded quite a bit. There are more programs, as you said. There's a lot of summer activities and a lot of additional events and the pods and so on. So I think the overall direction has been maintained, which I think was always the right direction, of a very broad view of theoretical computer science and its connections to other sciences. But I do think that it's terrific how the Institute's expanded, partly under your leadership and Shafi Goldwasser and so on. So the one piece I was always maybe a little bit conservative about the mission, and in particular I think if you try to do too many things, you can end up doing some of them not as well as you would like. So I would always, every time you take on something new, I would kind of ask, how important is this compared to what we're already doing? And what kind of resources can we put behind it? But other than that, I think it's as much as can be realistically accommodated is great. And I think the Institute continues. On my travels, I keep hearing that it's the home for theoretical computer science and adjacent fields. And prior to this institute, we didn't have a home. I mean, there were math institutes, but there was never really a computer science institute. So I think maintaining that status as the home for people to come to for interaction and leadership in the field is a great mission.
Great, yeah. Thank you very much, and I definitely will count on you for lots of advice and words of wisdom as I step into this role. So thank you very much for the chat. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
Yep.